Joseph "Joe" Bonanno was one of the most powerful and influential figures in American organized crime during the 20th century. His life story is one of power, betrayal, and survival across several major U.S. cities, and it is deeply intertwined with the history of the Mafia in America. Below is an account of his life, focusing on his movements between cities, his criminal history, murders linked to him, and his legacy in popular media, including documentaries. Early life and rise to power, 1905 to 1931. City, New York City. Bonanno was born in Castellammare del Golfo, Sicily, in 1905. At the age of 15, he fled to America to escape Benito Mussolini's crackdown on the Mafia in Italy. After arriving in New York City, he quickly became involved with Mafia figures in Brooklyn, working under the mentorship of Salvatore Maranzano. During the early 1930s, Bonanno became a key player in the Mafia wars between factions led by Maranzano and Joe Masuria, known as the Castellammarese War. When Masuria was murdered in 1931, Maranzano briefly became the boss of bosses, but was killed a few months later. Bonanno inherited control of Maranzano's crime family, which would later become known as the Bonanno crime family. At just 26 years old, Bonanno was one of the youngest Mafia leaders in history. The Golden Years of Power, 1931-1960s. City, New York City. Under Bonanno's leadership, the Bonanno crime family became one of the most powerful Mafia organizations in New York, with interests in gambling, loan sharking, and narcotics trafficking. Bonanno was known for his intelligence, keeping a low profile, and his preference for a more traditional Mafia structure, adhering to the old-world Sicilian codes of honor. Throughout the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, Bonanno maintained control of his empire and was deeply respected within Mafia circles. His reach extended into Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan, and his family's operations expanded to other cities across America. He became a member of the Mafia's ruling body, the Commission, which was created to avoid further Mafia wars and mediate disputes between crime families. The Mafia Wars and the Bonanno War, 1960s. Cities, New York City, Montreal, Tucson. The 1960s marked the beginning of a tumultuous time for Bonanno. A series of power struggles and betrayals rocked his family, culminating in what became known as the Bonanno War. Bonanno's ambitions clashed with those of other Mafia families, and his attempts to consolidate power were met with resistance. In 1964, he disappeared from New York City, and it was believed that his rivals had him killed or kidnapped. In reality, he had fled to Montreal, Canada, where his family had expanded operations. During his disappearance, a faction of his own crime family, led by his cousin Gaspar Di Gregorio, waged war against Bonanno loyalists. The Bonanno family was split into two, with violent confrontations occurring throughout New York City. After years of hiding, Bonanno resurfaced in 1966 and negotiated a truce. However, his control of the family had waned, and he was eventually forced into exile by the Mafia Commission. Bonanno retired to Tucson, Arizona, where he lived quietly with his family. Life in Tucson and later years, 1970s, 1980s. City, Tucson, Arizona. Though he was officially retired, Bonanno still wielded influence over Mafia operations, and law enforcement remained wary of his activities. He became a U.S. citizen in 1945, and his status as an elder statesman of the Mafia shielded him from further prosecution for years. During his time in Tucson, Bonanno began writing his memoirs, a controversial move as Mafia members were expected to take their secrets to the grave. His autobiography, A Man of Honor, published in 1983, gave a rare inside look into the Mafia world but also put Bonanno at risk of retaliation for breaking the code of silence, omerta. Despite the controversy, he lived a relatively quiet life in Arizona, largely avoiding legal trouble. In 1980, he was convicted of obstruction of justice for refusing to testify in front of a grand jury about his alleged involvement in organized crime. He served 14 months in prison. Murders and criminal activities. Throughout his reign, Bonanno was linked to several murders, either directly or indirectly. The most infamous of these are the murders during the Castellammarese War, particularly the assassinations of Joe Masuria and Salvatore Maranzano, which helped solidify his power. Although he kept a lower profile than other mob bosses, Bonanno's hands were never clean. His family was involved in the narcotics trade, which led to several violent conflicts with other Mafia families, especially in the 1960s. Bonanno's crime family was also involved in extortion, money laundering, and contract killings, and it is believed that he ordered or approved several murders during his time as the head of the family. However, Bonanno himself was rarely directly tied to these killings, as he operated through trusted lieutenants. Documentaries and media portrayal. Joe Bonanno's life and legacy have been the subject of numerous documentaries, books, and films. Perhaps the most famous is the 1999 made-for-TV movie Bonanno, A Godfather's Story, which chronicled his rise to power, the internal mafia wars, and his eventual downfall. The film was based on his autobiography and portrayed Bonanno as a man who adhered to a strict moral code, though the reality of his criminal life was much darker. Several documentaries have also been made about the Mafia and Bonanno's role in it, including Inside the Mafia and The Mafia's Secret History, which delve into his leadership style, the Bonanno Wars, and his interactions with other mob bosses. These documentaries provide a detailed look at his involvement in murders, criminal operations, and his survival during one of the most volatile periods in Mafia history. Death, 2002. Joe Bonanno lived longer than many of his Mafia contemporaries. He died of natural causes in Tucson, Arizona, in 2002 at the age of 97. His death marked the end of an era for the Mafia, as he was one of the last remaining figures from the original generation of Mafia leaders in America. Despite his criminal background, Bonanno's long life and relatively peaceful death made him a rare figure in the Mafia world, where violent ends were the norm. His influence on organized crime in America remains significant, and his life story continues to captivate people interested in the Mafia's inner workings. Legacy. Joseph Bonanno's legacy is a complex one. While he lived as a ruthless Mafia boss, deeply involved in organized crime and responsible for violence and murder, his longevity and strategic brilliance earned him a place in Mafia history. His memoir and documentaries about his life have portrayed him as a figure both feared and respected, and his name remains synonymous with Mafia power in the U.S. His family, the Bonanno crime family, continues to exist, though its power has significantly diminished. However, Bonanno's name and legacy in cities